Hello, I'm Richard Pharro. In 1994, after a career in civil engineering and a growing interest in project management, when I served on the board of IPMA and the Council of APM, I established APM Group. We started with a little-known project management methodology in the UK. The training community welcomed our approach, and APMG was born and hasn't looked back since. Over the years, I've been inspired by organisations, leaders, communities and individuals, and I'm always keen to have a coffee, or sometimes a little bit stronger, and a chat with those that really make a difference. Please get comfortable and join in my conversation with some of the biggest influencers in our market. Hello everyone, I'm Richard Pharro from the APM Group, and my guest today is Dani Dizes of the Business Relationship Management Institute. And I'm going to ask Dani to introduce herself because she's probably the most eclectic person I've ever spoken to. Her range of interests is vast and she has a very interesting take on life. So with that little introduction, Dani, over to you please to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Oh, well, thanks. Thank you for that, Richard. Yeah, I guess I feel like eclectic is a word I've heard most of my life. You know, that might be the nice way of saying weird, but that's okay. I'll take it. So in my day-to-day, I am the knowledge champion for Business Relationship Management Institute. And that title is made up. I made it up. I was hired as a writer and then the content strategist, and quickly saw that my real passion was in the broader scope of what business relationship management could be. And so I realized that what I was doing was I was actually just defending the knowledge that's contained within BRM Institute, and that I was passionate about expanding that and seeing how many lives we could touch with it and how many people we could help with it. So that's not unusual for me. You know, I sort of did the same thing. I am also the creator, founder, and run a meditation school here in Phoenix, Arizona, that is based in neuroscience and habit building. So I'm pretty passionate about understanding the brain and how the brain works, and habits and how habits form most of our lives, actually. So I bring a lot of that to BRM Institute. And then, of course, I'm an avid writer and reader, so starting with my love of Tolkien, which automatically endeared you to me, that you have read his work. You know, I think he was a fearless proponent of the power of language and imagination, and that has inspired me from a very young age to be fearless in bringing what's inside of me, the chaos and the creativity that's inside of me, and bringing that out into the world around me in a meaningful way, hopefully. And so that's sort of the root of that for me, is really what he was able to birth into the world, especially in a time in history that was so tumultuous and so dark. So I think that's me in a nutshell.
So Dani, before we get on to business relationship managers, do you think Tolkien would have written in the same way had he been alive today, with the use of technology and special effects? Or do you think his value to the world, the thing that's so good about Tolkien, was his ability to imagine at a time without those special effects, and being able to bring to life some of those very weird ideas, to use your own word, that allowed it, certainly me as a child, well, a teenager, to read Tolkien and disappear into a very different world from anything else I may have seen?
That's a great question. I mean, I wonder what his writing would have been like today. I think a lot of the themes would have been the same. You know, he was very against industrialization. He thought that we were destroying the world, the planet. And so was very connected to nature as a young person and into his adulthood. So I think, you know, I wonder, would he have been as able to be as imaginative with all of the inundation of technology that we have? Maybe. I mean, who knows? Maybe he would have retired like, you know, Thoreau and and found his own walden pond and continued to imagine a different world. So I like to think he would have changed the world no matter when he was born. But
okay, I think that's a fair comment. So within the Business Relationship Management Institute, you're the knowledge champion and content strategist. Mm-hmm. So why do business relationship managers need a knowledge champion and content strategist?
So I would say that business relationship managers in general don't need a content strategist, but I do think they need a knowledge champion. I would say the Institute needs a content strategist to make sure that we are delivering knowledge and content in a way that makes sense for our membership and for our readership. I think, business relationship managers need a knowledge champion because it's such a vast role. I know that the origin of it really was in breaking down the silos between business and IT, but even in the past, year and a half since I've been a part of the Institute, we've just seen this amazing expanse of BRMs into other roles, and into other areas of the organization. So the people function, really starting to see it in healthcare, we're seeing it in government. So I think because of that, there has to be a sense of understanding that the knowledge is where the skills and the mindset derive. And so having someone, and hopefully eventually many someones, who can champion that, who can champion the growth of that knowledge base, and everything that means.
I mean, you just touched on it there. My understanding of the business relationship manager was this linkage between the business and the IT shop, mm-hmm. to try to translate into each other's language what was required. And you said in the last 18 months to 2 years, maybe even a bit longer, you've seen it move out into other parts of the business. Mm-hmm. Are the skills the same? Are the skills transferable? Or do you need a different skill set if you're working throughout the business?
I think at the heart of it, the skills are the same. Even the title, business relationship management, right? So the core function of the role is understanding and propagating relationships. And so I think, obviously, yes, if you're working with IT, it helps to know a little bit of their language, but you probably just need to be conversational. You don't need to be an expert speaker. And the same, in any of the functions. And I think most people can learn, the basics of those languages. So I would say that I believe that the majority of the core skills are easily, at least readily transferable to other areas.
And do you find them at all levels in the organization, or are they at a junior level or at a senior level? Do you see strategic business relationship managers and tactical business relationship managers? What is your experience in your last couple of years as being a prophet, an evangelist of business relationship?
Yeah, so you see them at every level of the business. What's really fascinating is, we're about to release a benchmarking report that's from a survey that we do. And we'll continue to do. It's a running survey year over year. And what we've seen is there has been a shift, so that still probably the majority of business relationship managers are in that manager level. But what we see beyond that is that the two next levels, which we call senior manager and director, mm-hmm. have grown at the same rate. So we're seeing those two levels be more and more infiltrated with BRMs. So there's still a solid base at the manager level, but we're seeing the next two levels grow faster than any of the other levels, which is quite interesting, and showing that the value of business relationship managers is being recognized at those upper levels at a pretty quick rate. Yeah. And we do also see some at the vice president level or higher in an organization as well. So yeah, I would say we have kind of a whole gamut from manager all the way up through that vice president sort of level. You'll find BRMs.
And is there anyone in particular at the Csuite that's sponsoring this growth of business relationship managers throughout their organization?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I actually had to kind of ask Aaron his thoughts on this, because in my head, I was like, I imagine this must have been the CIO or the CTO in the past, But now we see such a variety of people championing this in businesses, in organizations, and in government functions, that I don't know that I could say that I think that there's just one. Where I would say we're seeing it kind of from the CEO through the CTO. I mean, just, I think it really just depends on the organization. I like to think that the visionaries in the C-suites are the ones who identify with business relationship management.
So if we stick with the visionaries in the C-suite, and I'm sure some organizations do have visionaries in the C-suite, but I'm sure that diversity in all its forms will improve that visionary nature of the C-suite.
Yes.
What problem are they trying to solve with business relationship managers? What do you think is the heart of why we're seeing this growth throughout the organization, and I believe globally? So what do you think is the core problem that those visionaries in the C-suite think the business relationship managers are going to help solve throughout the organization?
I think the safe answer here is, and language that we've used at the BRM Institute for a long time, is that business relationship managers break down silos. So they allow different areas, traditionally IT and business, to be able to communicate with each other, to be more productive, to advance the organization, the business itself. You're asking, of course, the most chaotic person in the organization. So I believe that what the C-suite is trying to solve, and maybe even without recognizing it, is that there has been a fundamental breakdown in relationships. Not just in organizations. I would say there's been a fundamental breakdown in relationships globally in every component of our lives, from our personal lives to our organizations to our society at large. And I think that part of that is being seen in organizations, because people they have lost the ability to connect and work together in a way that sparks creativity, that fosters chaos, that supports failure. And so I think even without understanding all of the time what they're looking for, I think there's a draw to this idea that here's a role that can come in and facilitate relationships, right? And so I think that's truly at the heart. And again, I don't even know that every person would agree with this who's looking for a BRM, but I do think that this is at the heart of what we're seeking when we say we want to break down silos, when we say we need cross-departmental relations. I think it comes back to this very human component of understanding everything is built on our relationships.
So if that is the case, and I think that's a great description of what a business relationship manager does that mean they leave their ego at the door and they have to provide this facilitation? Or do they need a strong ego and a strong sense of purpose, probably a better phrase, in order to bring these groups together and demonstrate the value of that collaboration, that cooperation, that communication?
Yeah, I think certainly the most successful BRMs will have that sense of purpose. They'll be able to identify and function within their purpose. And I love that you brought that up, because I think another appeal of this role is sort of the hope that it will help other people in the organization be able to identify organizational purpose, which is another bit, when they poll people and they ask people, oh, do you know your organization's purpose? Something like 70% of people polled are like, nope, I have no idea. So, that's really sad. It's sad that, when we poll people, I think Harvard Business Review did a poll and it showed that about 85% of people are at best sort of just mindlessly doing their job. They're not like actively engaged. It was about 15% of people felt purposefully engaged in the work that they do. And then
sorry, where do you put purpose alongside vision and mission within an organization?
I think your purpose has to drive your vision. I think, if you're trying to create a vision for your organization, but you don't understand the purpose of the organization, I don't know that your vision can really sustain what you're doing.
So purpose is really about doing doing the right thing even when other people aren't looking. It's an ethical connection.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's an ethical connection, and it's how we satisfy the self,
right,
in a way that will allow us to continue to satisfy the others around us, right? Because we can't, if we're never satisfying the self, then eventually we'll become resentful of the work that we do for others around us.
Interesting. That clearly taps very much into your other great passion around meditation, mindfulness, the development of the individual. But is that something that we all have, but we need to be braver to share it? Or is it something that some people are much more aware and able to bring that purpose and passion to the office, to the workplace every day?
So I think it's like playing an instrument. I tell people, some people can pick up a guitar and learn it in 3 months. Like there's something about it that's just easy for them. Whereas other people can struggle for years and maybe never be amazing at it, but they'll certainly learn. You can learn anything. And so I think this is the same way. I think for some of us, my mom will tell you one of the first things I ever said in this life was, "I'm here on a journey." So I think was
that why you were in the stroller going down the hill or something? Right.
Yeah. So I think for some people it's we just have this thing inside of us that's pushing that, and then others, they do need to learn. They need help understanding what their purpose is. How do they engage with that? How do they share it? And those are all tools that Business Relationship Management Institute is aware of, that we're developing content for, that we're hoping to create more trainings and workshops and webinars, because it is so important to be able to move from a place of purpose.
Now, you used a very interesting word there for me. So the Business Relationship Management Institute is about helping people develop and be able to grow in their career as BRMs. Mm-hmm. But you use the word learn rather than teach. So do you think that in order to be a high-performing BRM, it's about learning? You can be taught the basic concepts and maybe some of the basic techniques, but it's then learning through that experiential activity of what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, I think to be good at anything, you have to be willing to learn constantly from your own failures, from the failures of those around you, from knowledge outside of yourself, from knowledge within yourself. So, you can bring it back in psychology to fixed mindset, versus growth mindset. And so if you're not in that growth mindset, I don't see how you can be the best that you can be. And that's for a person or an organization or a society. So from my research, the Institute's been growing members globally, so it seems to have members from around the world. Are there any traits that you see in that growth? Are you seeing membership growth in certain countries other than others? Are you seeing any cultural differences in the way people sort of apply the concept of the business relationship manager in breaking down the silos in their own industries, in their own countries? Yeah, we are. I would say regionally, I can identify a few things. I would say something that surprised me is how the response from Canada has been so warm, and we have several groups in Canada, and they love this idea of relationshipism, and understanding BRM as a philosophy has really clicked with them as well. In some places in the East, the East is interesting because we either see the groups are just immediately like, yes, obviously it's a philosophy, or they're just really like, no, this isn't part of the hierarchy, we understand. And so they're struggling to adopt that language. I would say growth wise, we always, I think, see growth the fastest in the West, in the US and sort of Europe, but also I think that's because for now, and we hope to change this, most of us for BRM Institute live in the West.
But you are seeing, one can see a trend more towards the East as sort of the professional bodies that were currently strong in the West are now gaining members in the East. So you can see that trend. And one would expect that will grow and accelerate over the next few years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in South America as well, too. So, we are definitely seeing those. We're already looking at, our translations that are going to be necessary in the next, year or two here, because it's it's a trackable trend. Let's put it that way.
And with your love for language, do you think you can translate some of these concepts from the English language into other languages and still be true to the concepts behind them?
Yeah, I mean, if Murakami could do it, then I think anyone can do it, because Japanese is just fundamentally so different from like any other language. And so I think if he could write a beautiful book in Japanese and then write it in English as well, then I think that's hope for all of us. So.
Excellent. So if you were giving one piece of advice to somebody who wants to join the Business Relationship Management Institute to have a career as a BRM, what would be that golden nugget you would give them?
Oh man, just one. That's so hard because I have three.
Three. Let's be bountiful. Let's have the three.
Okay. I think for BRMs specifically, and this is something that I've heard from BRMs that I hear all the time, that, and not just me, that we hear all the time, is mentorship. When business relationship managers come into an organization and they don't have a community, they don't have a mentor, somebody to, sort of support them and help them through this process, they seem to struggle a lot more. And that's why we have programs in place. Every BRM Connect, you have a BRM buddy, so you're able to find someone that can sort of guide you through or help you figure out what tracks to be on. It's why we're so community-based. We have a myriad of communities of interest. So I would say mentorship, having someone to really like reflect with and grow with. The other thing would be just fearlessness. And I would that would be my piece of advice for anyone ever in any situation, is just be fearless. Be fearless in your pursuit of what you're doing. But I think it's especially true of anybody like a BRM who's responsible for talking to people and building relationships. That's a vulnerable role to be in. So I think you have to be fearless. And then the other one would be fail. Fail and learn from it, because all relationships experience failure at some point. So it's really like, if you fail with someone or you fail in a situation and you recover from that relationship just gets stronger, or that sense of self gets stronger, or that knowledge becomes more solidified. So that's another big one, is we see a lot of BRMs who, they go in and they don't get it right the first time. They don't totally nail the metrics, or they don't totally nail the process. And then the ones who circle back around and they learn from that and they dive back in, those are the ones that we see just take off. Those are the BRMs where, a year later their program is 14 BRMs and, and they're just really thriving. So I think just fail.
So if I'm in an organization and I don't have a visionary at the C-suite, and I don't have people within the organization that really understand the value of the BRM role, mm-hmm. How do I convince the C-suite? Should I be fearless enough to leave and join another organization, or should I actually have the battle within the organization to try to convince them? Do you have any views from that, again, in your discussions with BRMs globally? How do you get the organization to recognize the real value of, mm-hmm. of what you're talking about without having to be so fearless I'm off?
Yeah, I think sitting at this past BRM Connect, we did we had the first women in BRM meeting, and men were there as well, but the idea was just to sort of understand the unique challenges that women in the BRM role face. And that was one of the things that kept coming up was, at the table, and we had, like I said, we had men at our table as well, but just sort of this discussion of feeling like, how do we get our C-suite to see our value, especially when in a lot of these organizations, we don't have direct access to our C-suite. And so, I think this comes back to, and there are a lot of tools for this on the online campus, the BRM Institute online campus. I think it comes back to two things. One, there are very real metrics and there are very real processes that you can use that will demonstrate to your organization, to your C-suite, the value that you're having, and that's tangible and intangible value as well. So I highly recommend, any of those tools. The maturity model is great, and then even as you're looking at the BRM DNA, it'll sort of walk you through kind of those different layers, and there's tools for each of those along the way. And then the other thing I would say is that we can move back into sort of that Eastern philosophy again and say that you shouldn't really seek to tell someone how valuable you are. Just make yourself so invaluable in the organization that they don't want to do without you. They don't even have to understand what you're doing fully, as long as they can feel the value that you're bringing. And so I think you do that through more of these leadership skills, what are being called power skills now, relationship building itself, understanding how to influence. And again, those are all skills that the BRM Institute is aware of and that we're growing our body for, because I think it's two sides. I don't think you can just do one or the other.
And it may well be, of course, that the Institute's only, 8 years old, 7 years old?
Yeah, so it's coming up on 6 or 7 years old. So,
and how long did it take more established professions, old professions, if you like, to become established so people recognize the value of what those people bring to the organization? So to have got as far as it has within 6 or 7 years, maybe the BRM Institute has outperformed any other institute before it.
I mean, I'd like to think that. Now you've got my analytical research brain going, and I'm like, oh, I want to do a comparative analysis on how long some of those other institutes took, because certainly it has moved. I would say it's moved very quickly, and I think one of the other things that came out of the benchmark was we're seeing that people who started in the BRM role, by and large, are still in it. So from our first benchmark until now, we're seeing the vast majority of those people are still in a BRM role, which tells us that though their role might have evolved or they may have moved to a different organization, they at least are finding places that find value for them, that they're able to stay employed in this role.
And no doubt become more influential because they bring more experience to the organization and therefore can make an even bigger difference than when they were at a junior role. Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people don't know this, but BRMs are one of the highest paid roles in most organizations. Which is, I feel like part of me is like, oh, the secret's out of the bag, and then the other part of me is like, yes, let it out. We need more BRMs. But it's really fascinating when you look that the value of the BRM role continues to grow. And so a lot of BRMs really our benchmarking report is showing a lot of them are making well above entry threshold for any manager positions in other areas. So, there's got to be some kind of value being recognized, because they don't just pay you a lot of money for no reason. Believe me, I've tried.
Yeah, I've been there as well, but I could never get them to even think of paying me for no reason. And Danny, it's been great talking to you and sharing your views on the Business Relationship Management Institute, the BRM and the Growth of the Institute, and the importance and the impact that members are beginning to make. And I am fairly confident will continue to make over the next few years as the Institute grows from strength to strength. Many thanks for sharing your views both on the Business Relationship Management Institute and indeed on Tolkien and the people within Tolkien's books. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard.